In this video, we're going to learn about inverse functions. Let's find the inverse functions of these following functions. Let's look at f of x is equal to 3x plus 4. What I'm going to do first is rewrite f of x as y is equal to 3x plus 4. What I will do then next is swap y for x. So I will keep x on this side and write 3y plus 4. Now if I'm going to find the inverse function, I want to make y the subject. So in order to make y the subject, I'm going to carry over the 4 first. So I have x subtract 4 on this side. And then to make y on its own, I divide the whole entire of the other side by 3. So my f of x, my inverse function, is equal to x minus 4 over 3. And that's the inverse function. So let's try another example. Now let's look at this function. I'm going to find the inverse function. So what I'll start off doing, swap the f of x with y equals to 3x minus 4 over 3. I will then swap x and y, so I will make my y x and my x a y, and then I will slowly rearrange this to make y the subject. So what I will do is I'll take 3 over first, so it's a multiply, so I get 3x, and then I will take the minus 4 over to the other side, so it therefore inverses to give me a plus 4, and to make y the subject, I then take this multiply by 3 and bring it over to the other side, and then it inverses to give me a divide by 3. So my inverse function is f minus 1x is equal to 3x plus 4 over 3. Okay, so let's try another one. You may want to pause the video or just work with me on this question. So as I did before in the previous example, I'm going to, instead of writing f of x, I'm going to write y is equal to x, subtract 2 with a square. Then I'm going to swap my y over on this side with an x, and I will also swap my x on this side with a y. Now, what I will then do is slowly rearrange this formula to make y the subject. Now, as we have a square outside the brackets, it's the furthest from the y, so it's the first thing I'm going to move. So if I move a square to the other side, it will inverse to give me a square root of x. Then, to make y the subject, I bring over that negative 2, and that would inverse to a positive 2. So the inverse function to this function is the square root of x plus 2. Let's try another example. Now let's look at this. So let's inverse the function. So what I would do, like I have done in all the other examples, is swap this for y. And now swap my y for the x here, and my x for the y. And very similar to the previous example, I want to make y the subject. The cube is the thing that's outside the bracket, so that's the first thing I'm going to move. So the inverse of cube is cube root. That means I do not need the bracket anymore on this side. And then I take my negative 3 over to the other side, and that would inverse to a positive 3, and then I have y. So my f of x inverse function is the cube root of x plus 3. So let's try a harder one this time. So difficult ones would contain an unknown at the top and the bottom, but let's follow the same process. So y is, so we're going to swap f of x for y. So we're looking at this function, and then we're going to swap the position of y for x. And therefore we're going to further swap the x's for y on this side, and that includes the denominator. Now we're going to inverse the function by rearranging it to make y the subject. What we're first going to do is try and get rid of that denominator. Okay, so as you can tell, we're going to have y's on the both sides. You're going to expand this out, so we have 5x and minus yx, and that equals to 4y. Our intention is to make y the subject, so what you're going to do is keep your y's to one side. I'm going to bring this y back over, so it's a positive yx, and leave my 5x there. What I will then do is factorize out my y, so I can isolate it. I have 4 plus x, and that equals to 5x. Now, just to continue upwards, to make y the subject, you must remove the entire bracket to the other side. So shift that to the other side, and as it's multiplying, as over a bracket means to multiply, it becomes a division on the other side. So this is in fact the inverse function of f of x. So therefore we've put our f of x symbol of f to the minus 1 with the x, and this is our answer. So 5x over 4 plus x. So there's one more with unknowns on the top and the bottom. You may want to look back at a previous video I've done just to show you how to deal with the unknowns on the top and the bottom, how to rearrange. But we're going to follow the very similar process to what we've done before. We're going to swap this for y. And then what we're going to do is then swap these around. So we've got 1 plus 2y over 7 plus y. So the first thing I'm going to do is lift this 7 plus y to this side. And that leaves me with a 1 plus 2y. And then expand out. So I have a 7x plus xy. And I have a 1 plus 2y on this side. And so everything that contains a y I'm going to bring onto this side. So xy reverses to give me a negative xy. And this 1, as it does not contain a y, it's going to move on to the other side, inversing it to a 7x minus 1. So the idea is that we want to make y the subject, so I'm going to factor out my y, leaving me with a 2 minus x, and on this side I still have my x minus 1, I haven't altered it, and I make y the subject by taking 7x minus 1, taking that entire bracket, which means it's multiplying by the y, and inverse of multiply is a division, and therefore you have the inverse function f to the minus 1x, which is a notation for the inverse function, and this would be our answer.